Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the invitation. Great to be with you here today. And, I guess I got 10 minutes to tell you a quick story, and I think there's some sort of a question period later on, so maybe you can join me there if anything piques your interest. But this is some of you, I see some familiar faces here, and some of you may know I did some graduate work in the mid-90s in New Zealand, and I was studying a gold deposit in Fiji. And in 1995, I drove to this area with my father, who's our chairman, and we're both geological engineers, and we found 8 grams gold in a highway cut in Veracruz, Mexico. And that was started, nearly quarter century exploration program that's resulted in multiple discoveries. So Azucar is the latest of 3 companies that has been working on this interesting area of Mexico where there's not any historic known deposits. What was interesting about it for me is that there's a real X marks the spot regionally. I wound up doing another degree working on why these things are occurring in this part of Mexico that hitherto had no deposits associated with it. And we spent 10 years in a Hughes 500, somehow survived, going from Texas border all the way to Guatemala. And this area is very exciting. We have a district here where we have a whole porphyry area that's never been explored before, except by us. And it's been kind of waiting in the wings because it's been part of a larger project which is now split. There's a gold side of this project which our past partners focused on, and I always liked this part of the project which we're now focused on, and I always compared it to a deposit, a porphyry deposit in Australia called Cadia. There's this potassium in these rocks and these high elements that are unusual that makes this a very great place to look for gold-rich porphyry deposits. And Newcrest operates that mine, and I interacted with their geologists over the years. They're focused on big deposits in Australia. There's the Cadia district, and some new discoveries that they've made in Indonesia. And now they, as Joe just mentioned, they invested in this project. They're a 20% shareholder, 19.9. They gave us about $18 million for that to drill the heck out of this thing, which is basically what we're going to do for the next couple of years. And the reason why they came is because I guess they like that regional concept that this is a real geochemical thumbprint, a hot spot on the planet where you could get these types of gold-rich porphyries, and we've proven that now with a number of drill holes over this 5-kilometer stretch. So it's a huge area. We've got some good values that are indicative of the potential for this system. And now we've got a budget to go and drill the heck out of it, like I say. So with that preamble, I'll whip through very quickly some of the essential things that I'd like you to take away with. We've got some pretty significant values here already, and I'll tell you about them in a little bit more detail. But we're bringing together a lot of years of exploration experience in Mexico into an area of outstanding infrastructure. Porphyries are challenging to drill often because, by and large, the last discoveries we've seen over the last, say, couple of decades have been very high, for example, in the Andes and in challenging environments. And drilling them can cost, sometimes you're drilling $1 million holes. We drill with our portable rigs that can get to up to 1,500 to 2,000 meters. We have been drilling ourselves with our own all-Mexican team for $30 to $40 a meter, and that doesn't change with depth. So we have that unique capacity and local knowledge because we've been in Mexico all that time I described. Almadex is kind of the other result of this spin-out. I won't belabor this point, you can ask me about it, but the point is we got 3 companies with A names, and I'm talking about Azucar. Almaden is working on 2.5 million ounce gold deposit we also discovered in this district. So they're the first movers in this area, and it's early days, and I think that we are dealing with a brand new district and more will evolve. So there's 3 companies focused on it, but I mentioned infrastructure, and just very quickly, there's not too many porphyry exploration projects that are located about 10 kilometers from a nuclear power plant, gas pipelines, highways, deep sea ports. We're 1 to 300 meters above sea level in an area that is unparalleled for the kind of infrastructure you need to develop a large deposit like a porphyry. Good access throughout the project. We've been there for a couple of decades, so we have good relationships and our full permits to drill. Just a map, a colorful map here. What we're looking at is red being high magnetics and blue being low magnetics, and both can be important in porphyry environments, particularly these gold-rich environments. One of the biggest in the world of gold-rich type porphyries, Oyu Tolgoi in Mongolia, has the early deposit, which turned out to be the much smaller one associated with the mag high, and the deep high-grade Hugo North deposit is actually a mag low. So, but we've got both features spread out over this, I've been mentioning 5 kilometers in strike, and that's what we see here. This is the trend of the alteration. This is the zone that has the most drilling, simply because we got into something really exciting early on. And this is kind of our big kahuna target, where our initial drilling has hit some plus 1% copper right from surface, and it's very early days. Just a picture here of what I already mentioned, our low-cost drilling and the infrastructure, and you can see we're not at 5,000 meters in the Andes, so this is pretty sweet infrastructure for this kind of deposit type. Just to talk about scale again, this is again 5 kilometers of separate porphyry centers, we believe, that are related to a larger system. And there's various different levels of erosion, and that's just a fancy word for saying that we're down to the level of the top of these porphyry systems. And we know that from all the seemingly esoteric bits of data we gather as geologists, and we can see that if there's a big high-grade deposit to be found, it's beneath us. And we've got all the top of the system, which in many cases you don't want scraped away already. Often high in porphyry systems you get things like arsenic and minerals like energite, which is a copper gold mineral, which very rich mineral, but it has arsenic with it. But we're into the top of the true porphyry system, and we're seeing minerals like chalcopyrite and bornite associated with these various different intrusive systems. Some are planar dike-like things, so they're going to have different forms, we think. But the scale is quite impressive. We've got breccia pipes that are chucking up fragments of porphyry from beneath, and we've got an unroofed porphyry here exposed. So our targets are simple. We're looking for everything. This is Cadia, and I'll just very quickly, I see my time running out, so I'll just tell you a little bit about how this deposit developed. And this is Newcrest's bread and butter, and it's again got good infrastructure. It's 400 or so kilometers from Sydney. They started with this Cadia Hill discovery, incidentally, after about 4 or 5 majors went through and missed all these deposits. They started with a very small porphyry that was, I believe, around 150 million tons ultimately, open pittable, under 0.2 copper, and about 0.7 grams gold. Shortly thereafter, 10 years thereafter, they drilled under totally barren 500 meters, where if you're 100 meters away in the alteration, you don't see it. A 44 million ton porphyry that was very high grade that they've pretty much mined out now with sublevel caving. This made a lot of money for them. They're now developing 3 billion tons over here. This is a mega world scale porphyry, but you never would have known it from the way it started. So, and these porphyries, even though they're so close together, they manifest themselves in completely different ways. So what we know is we're in the right environment for this type of system. And we also know that we've got some pretty good intersections to start with. Within a broader interval, we've got this that we're following up, where we think there's the chance for high-grade mineralization to persist to depth. It's not very often you hit something like that, 70 meters of over 2 grams gold and 0.6% copper. We're seeing some good vectoring in places where we see chalcopyrite move into bornite, the increase in vein density. So we spent a year putting together all this data and are at the point now where we can start with $17 million, extremely cheap drilling. We're very knowledgeable in these systems. We know how to explore them. And now we've got the gas and a great group like Newcrest behind us. I'm happy to report that we've interacted with them, as you might expect, considerably on geologic matters. And when you overlay our two maps of where you would logically drill, they're the same maps. So we're looking forward to reporting to you and our shareholders on our progress over the next months, and I expect this program to play out as a systematic, methodical drilling program over the next 18 months. And anything can happen at any point, but we've had a pretty good start so far. Thank you very much.